Today's topic is volcanoes. Yes, not just that, but all week long we will be talking volcanoes. And for those who don't know, we go live. Sorry, we go live Monday through Friday. It's kind of like our podcast, and we simulcast over on Twitch, YouTube, and Fantasy Grounds College Discord. Yes, we do. We're the cool kids that hang down there at the very bottom in the boiler room. You know, smoking pot and all that kind of stuff. In the tabletop community type of thing. Yes. Now, thank you very much, Tesla. So, if you would like to participate, you can of course participate in the live chat on YouTube, or you're able to participate in a much larger typewritten format if you join Fantasy Grounds College and join the Discord and join us there. Now, and of course, you can catch the show later because it will be on YouTube, and these shows are also uploaded to SoundCloud as well. So let's get into it. So we're talking about volcanoes, and Discord Tuesday is kind of a grab bag, and I've generally pushed this over into mechanical things that we can use in a tabletop community. And so I thought we would talk about that a little bit. Hey guys, what's going on? Zevron08 says, funny enough, was planning an Eberron game soon, and Eberron has an F ton of volcanoes. Yeah, volcanoes are fun. In a purely tabletop role playing event, we do have a member of our community, hello Omen, that lives in the Philippines, and they are having an issue with volcanic activity, and there are many people around the world that live within the proximity, and proximity is a relative term because depending on the power of an active volcanic region, they can stretch for hundreds, possibly even thousands of miles and or kilometers. So yesterday was Monster Monday, and we talked about maybe some creatures or NPCs, some motivations as to why people would live around a location, some of their actions and or reactions from an inactive to an active volcano. But I think mechanically speaking, yes, Third Pillar Thursday, you guys know about the exploration pillar of gaming. You know I'm going to talk about all the choking hazards and ash and that kind of thing. What I'm thinking of mechanically speaking is how would you and if you would change a number of the actions and reactions and gaming effects because volcanism is such a combination of so many things. Here's what I mean. Let's say you've got your PC running along the ground, and a volcano is spewing forth hot ash and debris, and you've created some kind of randomized effect for them to have to dodge, or they have to make a saving throw, or some kind of athletics check, or whatever the case may be in your gaming system. Of course, if you're not playing Dungeons and Dragons, and they're struck by a massive chunk from this volcano. Would it be like fire damage, heat damage, or would it be impact damage, or would you split the difference and kind of make it a little bit of both, right? And that's kind of my where I'm heading towards, right? Like in terms of the environment, in terms of enemies, in terms of the capabilities the PCs or NPCs have, splitting the difference between so many aspects of the volcanic region. So, for example, if there is there some kind of pyromancer or some kind of druidic cult or pathway that a character could find, would you be willing to change some of their options so that it's not just maybe there's a character that's like a player character that agrees and says, you know what, I want to be a druid, but I want to be a druid of a volcano, would you allow them to pick different options other than those associated with fire, but some associated with the earth, or ash, or smoke, or even associated with life and living plants, because we all know how rich the soil is in and around the bases of volcanic regions, how rich the soil gets. And I think it would be really cool to and different for your setting to allow players to pick something like that. Zev says, I always like the image of a red dragon living in a volcano and is tied to it. The angrier they get, the more active it gets. An ancient red dragon has magma and volcanic rock for its scales. Yeah, we we talked about Rodan and actually the origins of Rodan's name. But anyway, yeah, we talked about the Godzilla King of the Monsters movie, and how Rodan came up out of the volcano and spread its wings and stuff. That's actually pretty, whether you like the movie or not, the image of that is just completely awesome. And I loved the image of the pterodactyl styled creature, although you could easily translate this to a red dragon, where its um, rear regions were like burning like embers, like when it flew through the air. Bits and pieces of it were like drifting in the wind, as if it was constantly burning, and then charred remnants of it were left behind. And I like that idea. I love the idea, like you said, Zev. Yep. Zev says, and when you slice one open, its blood intermixes with lava because it's so magically strong. Or as if you were to pierce its flesh, if you could get past its superheated skin, that it would spew out like a gout of flame, or spill down its sides like lava instead of just regular blood or something. I love that idea. I actually, I mean, we even talked about, yesterday, having like an earth elemental, but its insides were lava instead of just being like a solid creature or something. The Dungeons and Dragons has mephits. They're like elemental mephits, and they are a mix of two other elements together, and so many of them fit, like mud, steam. You know, my brain just farted. Mud, steam, ash, smoke, lava, that kind of stuff. So yeah, exactly. you leave you leave Rodan alone. Zevron's like, Rodan is objectively the worst monster. It does nothing but get his beak rearranged to show the strength level of the new monster. And let's be real. The hero, of course, is Godzilla. So of course the other creatures are you know they're gonna get their asses whooped at some point. That's the whole point. Um, Alley Oop says dragons are supposedly the primordial beings, so it is possible for a red dragon to have magma blood or scales. You know what? And I think sometimes if we just start with our descriptions of these monsters and adversaries, the things that our PCs encounter, um, I think you can add a lot more intensity and fear into their hearts, especially if you start describing it and it's not attached to what a player character normally associates with for that creature. Um, yeah, that's definitely a GM or a DM toolbox thing, right? Taking the stat block, but really reshaping and retwisting it or something. Deadman says there's also the volcano in the middle of the Morrowind in the Elder Scrolls games. Um, I've never played the Elder Scrolls games, but the fact that there is a volcano there, volcano in game, and listen, like we mentioned yesterday, volcanoes have such a historic, mythological power to them. I mean, they do seemingly become monolithic things of nature, as if the gods themselves have placed this on the ground and their wrath or their anger spews forth much like a massive storm or a hurricane or a tornado or typhoon or something represents the ocean. Uh, Volcanoes very much represent, you know, that which comes out of the earth. You know, it would be very easy for someone who has never had an image of what they imagine hell to be, you know, punching forth out of the very earth and spewing forth out of the top of a mountain, to be hell on earth. So yeah, it's pretty easy. And so in tabletop games, if that's a realism, of course it is. Zera says it's essentially the wharf of Godzilla. You're wrong. You're so wrong. Oh man. Omen says in Skyrim Dragonborn, you see the aftermath of that. They even have ash zombies of all things. See, I like that idea. I like mixing. I would absolutely love to mix and disrupt the expectations of player characters by mixing something like the undead with this elemental effect, and it it being part of it, but not yet not being becoming its own thing. You know, not it's like a combination of both elemental and undead, but it's neither one. Deadman says the volcano is called the Red Mountain in the Elder Scrolls series, and puts in the link. Thank you, thank you. Zev's folding his arms and putting his foot down. All right, so Tesla says there are. Let's see what kind of Muffets. Jeez, like they're tasty. Fire, water, air, earth, salt, ash, steam, ooze, magma. I think all these fit. Lightning. You have lightning, especially if the mountain is affecting the ozone layer. Ice. If a volcanic mountain is tall enough, it is many of them have their base or at least a mid-level band surrounded by ice. Dust, smoke, mist, radiant, maybe mineral, glass, and sulfur methods. It says thank you Wikipedia. That's awesome. Says like prove me wrong. Extends out extends arms out in a come at me bro pose like what? Psh, whatever. uh, how strong is a new monster? It beat Rodan in 3 hits. 3 hits? That's 4 less than the last monster to fight Rodan. Yeah. Yeah, you gotta have your supposed like how tough is this thing? Well, it beat this other thing. um Zev says the Ash Warriors are so cool in Elder Scrolls. I believe the souls of the dead that aren't properly laid to rest or are cursed can rise as one. And here's a way for us to, in a mechanical way, to both reskin something we normally use and still allow the player characters to figure out what the hell's going on. So let's take this like Ash Warriors, Ashen undead thing as an example, right? Maybe you're using some kind of a stat block or capability from like, hey, I'm going to use skeletons or zombies or something. And maybe you've added something else to them. Like if you hit them and kill them or strike them, they burst into or expel some kind of choking hazard or something, much like much like a ghoul. Classically, a ghoul's fingernails, if they strike you, they will paralyze you from their diseased nails because they eat uh, the, um, as they try to consume the flesh of the dead or something. So you've added something to them. Maybe they expel a fog cloud or whatever, or some kind of effect. Every time they're hit or killed, they explode into some kind of dust, and you have to make like a con save or something, whatever. Right. So you've added this element to them, and or maybe either or both effects happen in your game. Maybe they can be turned by a cleric or paladin that has something against undead. Maybe there's a ranger that hunts the undead. And in addition to which, because you said as a game master to yourself, you're like, you know what? I'm going to give these monsters this extra extra ability. Maybe they're burning on the inside and they can spew out fire, or if someone pierces them with a weapon, blood um, their blood extends lava onto the weapon. It might burn their hand or something. So you say, well, you know what? Since they have this bonus, I'm going to give them a little bit of a limitation. So maybe the druid or ranger in the group who is able to fight or confront elementals also can turn them or destroy them, or has some extra capability to strike them down. Is that a modification of the rules, a mechanical effect? Sure. And so in addition to them having like, this is a weird trade-off, but they have a double vulnerability, so you give them like this double ability to do these other things. Deadman says Mephit's first appearance was in White Dwarf number 13 in June 1979. White Dwarf? Not like Dragon Magazine? Hmm. But we were talking about Mephits. Mephits are basically elemental fey creatures, and they're pretty at a minimum level. They are playful and practical jokers, up to being one little tiny elemental fey creatures that cause havoc and sabotage things and can operate as messengers and spies and scouts and the eyes and ears of ever larger and more powerful elemental creatures that might be trying to step forward into our world. And the very ash and embers and things being spewed out of the top of a volcano could very well be probably 80 to 90% of the list that Tesla Ranger put in. Fire, yeah, is mud on there? I don't see mud in that list. Maybe there isn't one. Well, earth and water mixing together would be mud, so I'm kind of surprised about that. But whatever. Yeah. says I always just call them elemental gnomes. Aliub says it would be ooze, which we talked about that a little bit about that yesterday. How many from poisonous gases to oozes and acid rain and debris falling from the sky and stuff. Yeah, why the hell not? Zev says it's not even the body that rises. The dust and ash swirls and mixes with the volcanic rock to harden and form a body. Some versions even have a fire area effect because their body is so hot it radiates. And yeah, why the hell not? Especially if yesterday we talked about the typical, walking the virgin sacrifice up to the top of a volcano and dumping them in to appease the gods. What if those people that were sacrificed come back to exact their revenge? And so there's their skeletal body, but their skeleton remains, but attached to that skeleton are the volcanic effects of this place, like a blackened rock or glass or obsidian, or maybe lava coalesces around their skeletal form, and then that in turn is collected with like rock and ash and things like that. Yeah, what a great way to do that. As a matter of fact, you could easily reskin demons, devils, outer plane creatures, liches, as well as, heck, even like vampiric creatures or something. You could very easily reskin them to so that when they're using their powers and abilities, it looks like everything that would be volcanic around them. So instead of, I don't know, like instead of teleporting, yeah. Alex says, is it me or is it hot as hell in here? Yeah. And the fiendish creature is like, oh, it's hot. Yeah, as hell. Right? But maybe, it's possible that, yes, it could definitely come from hell, and it could be a portal. Volcanoes are literally a portal that these devils and or demons are trying to punch punch through to the prime material plane. They could be just things that live under the earth. Maybe that literally is where the sins of mankind go to reside, and they become the fiends of our world, and they're like trying to climb their way, scamper their way back up to Earth's surface out of the core. And maybe they're just natural creatures in your world, and instead of teleporting like Nightcrawler and Bamfing from one place to another, maybe they literally burst into smoke and embers, and then that smoke and embers like coalesces into another place, forming a solid body for them, like Zevron was talking about the Ash Warriors. I would absolutely create something like that. Uh, what is Any number of creatures can change into it, like a gaseous type of form, or hell, you just give that ability to some random, I don't know, what's a rando creature, like an orc or an ogre or cyclops or something like that. You could pick a cyclops and go, have your stat block. As a matter of fact, in a virtual tabletop, and I'm sure those at Fantasy Grounds College would easily teach this to you. But if you have Fantasy Grounds, you can go in and make a copy of a creature and then change the stat block on it. So instead of a cyclops, maybe you give it some kind of teleportation ability, or ability to turn into like a gaseous form, or throw some kind of like fire at your PCs, and maybe instead of like a single blinking eye, it's just this like burning ember with flames coming out of it, and there's an eyeball in it, much like the eyeball that Sauron was in the Lord of the Rings movies, except a little smaller. But yeah, it could be that. So everyone said, I just had the mental image of a pirate crew sailing down a stream of lava on a magic ship, and it's awesome. Yeah, why the hell not? Listen, we're in tabletops. You can create anything you want, and if there are literally rivers and oceans of lava that you have to sail across, you wouldn't want to walk the plank, right? But if there is some kind of material that, like, I don't know, the dwarves construct these things out of a cold rolled iron or something, and they're sailing ships on these waves of lava, and you give the burning seas the same aspects that a liquid, our earthen liquid sea would have, except of course pretty damn dangerous. You wouldn't want a wave of lava or flame sweeping over the deck of your ship, but it would be fun to include that. And yeah, I think that would be cool. Matter of fact, someone I posted something about volcanoes on Facebook, and someone said, imagine just sailing on a regular, like a pirate crew sailing on the oceans, and a volcanic island appears before them, literally punching its way out of the ocean depths and spewing forth, and you see like this steam coming up, and literally it becomes this new boiling island as the sailing crew is trying to dodge through steam and mist and fog that's created from the end result of this volcano coming out of the ocean's depths. Yeah, I think that'd be awesome. And of course, you have to have your sailing navigation skill checks and all that kind of business, keeping some of your crew from falling over the outside. You might have a little bit of a mutiny. They're like, hell, I'm not going in that. Yeah, Zev's like Lava World. It's like Water World, but hot and good. Yeah. Dead Man says, for those curious methods, these creatures first appeared in the first edition as imps in the magazine White Dwarf, number 13. I remember imps, including the fire imp, the molten imp, the smoke imp, and the steam imp. The fire method, the lava method, smoke method, and the steam method appeared in the original Fiend Folio, 1981. Maybe that's where I remember them from, because I remember literally purchasing the Fiend Folio when it was brand new. The ice method and the mist method first appeared in the adventure module Eye of the Serpent, 1984. Dimworld, Dimwold, the method appeared in the module The Throne of Bloodstone in 1988. Old school. I'm showing my age. Wow. Yeah, Fiend Folio. That's the Gith Zeri and the Gith Yankee. I don't know why they became such popular things, but then they also had some pretty ridiculous things in there, like flumps and queens, which were kind of powerful, and other things in the Fiend folio. Great artwork too. I very much became squirreled on that one. All right, guys. So the some other mechanical effects I think we could include in our volcanic in our volcanic setting would be the idea that um, okay, try to follow me on this. If you're someone who loves a world in which survival itself is very important, meaning gathering supplies, finding shelter, um, gathering food, finding a good drinking water, navigating things like that. I'm well aware. Uh, Al, you silly. All righty, pop and smoke. Uh, I understand that there are fifth edition Dungeons and Dragons has a number of easy buttons. Basically, character abilities that say that they can circumvent a lot of these things, like, oh, I never get lost, or I can always find food, things. Now, if you want to talk with your players, have a little session 0 and say, hey, I want to have a little bit more difficulty, I'll allow you to do those things, but only in the regions that are especially adapted for your player character. Like if you are a winter adapted druid or ranger, yeah, you can always find food in the frozen land, tundra, but not here with these around this volcanic area. So if you had a volcano in this like wintry place, and one of the characters is like, yeah, I'm playing a ranger, like a Viking style ranger that can survive out in the cold, and all I wear is a loincloth and got my battle axe or something. You might want to introduce and say, well, listen, yes, but in this particular circumstance, you're gonna have to make some rolls. I'll give you advantage or some kind of bonus, or uh, excuse me, have the effect or something like that. For example, like a player character that has some kind of resistance or immunity to fire may still suffer, say, bludgeoning damage from debris that's falling from the sky, and it, adjudicating the idea that there may be some modifications to some of the rules in terms of how the characters react to what they're doing. Um, yeah, like Zevron says, what damage type would you associate with carbon monoxide poisoning? Poison or necrotic? Yeah, well, first, I love the question, and second of all, you could go with one or the other or both. So in other words, if you have an even, it doesn't have to be even, but if you have multiple dice, let's say something does 4d6 damage, maybe it does 2d6 of one and 2d6 of the other. So if a character is immune or resistant to poison damage, and you roll 2d6 for the poison, and you adjudicate it however the player character is. Listen, I've got resistance to poison, or I make my saving throw with advantage against poison. So you do that portion of it, and then maybe the other portion. Sounds complicated in some ways, but if you really want to embrace it, and there are many creatures that do, not just creatures but player characters that do multiple forms of damage, meaning like, hey, I've got my sword that does slashing damage, but I get to add to it my flame damage as well. Or there are creatures that will, hey, they do bite damage, piercing damage, but they also add to it poison or acid damage or something like that. And depending on your table, if you think this is going to like add too many die rolls and extend out the gaming time a little too much, you might not want to do that. In which case, I would do a flip a coin, even the odds kind of thing, between one or the other. Or if you have a good group of people that knows what the hell's going on, and they are on the same page with you as a game master, split down the middle, or make a random list of like your top 6 damage sources, and it's random, so the players don't even know what's going to happen to them. Even you as the game master, you're like, okay, make a roll. There's a gout of gases, spewing out of the earth. Let's roll to see what it is. Is it acidic? Is it necrotic? Is it poison? Is it flames coming out of the ground? Let's randomly roll. As PCs try to navigate their way across a place filled with geysers spewing something out of the ground or something. So yes, perfect question there, Zevron. Like, would you make it poison or necrotic damage or what have you? And my answer to that is both either or neither if you want to do that in your game. And also, uh, I'm flowing into Thursday, but I love the idea that unlike a trap in a classic dungeon, right? Someone designs a trap that you fall into a pit, where the floor slides and tilts and you get dumped somewhere. What I love about the idea of using volcanoes is that you can very, very easily, not just easily, I think it would even be accepted by your player characters that these rando hazards that are around, these traps, not only are you telling them, your PCs up front, hey, guess what? There's traps, right? Um, yeah, Ted said, I was like, DBJ, good question. The answer is yes. um, yeah, my way of dodging around the answer, like, whoo, glad I answered that one. Wow, man, I didn't know what I was talking about. But if I had to pull an answer out of my ass, that would be the answer. The answer would be, yeah, all the above, or some of the above, or what have you. But again, the idea that you're telling your players up front, guess what? This place is hazardous. There will be air quotes traps for you to navigate around. Um, you're going to have to use your skills, and there might be dangerous things you might come in contact with, and yet at the same time, it's still a cool setting, and I think your player characters would still be tense with danger as they're, I don't know, fighting the goblinoids on the ridge, knowing that if someone, I don't know, lights some kind of flame, that it might ignite some methane gas pocket that's below them, or if they step the wrong way across the blackened landscape, that it'll crack beneath their feet and spill them down into lava that's flowing underneath them from the thin ground, or they're passing through a valley. You always got to pass through a dangerous valley with precarious rock, above them, and at the slightest sound, or of movement or something like that, that the rock will tumble down on top of them. You know me, I love that kind of stuff, and to let the player characters know that up front does not, to me anyway, does not change the impact of having the thing happen in the first place. And of course, letting the player characters use and abuse those locations, right? If they navigate through a plane of dangerous rando gouts of poisonous gas and flame, and then the players then, the rogue then leads, they're being chased by an enemy, and they're like, well, I don't need to try to backstab all of them. What is it? You said there are 27 of them. You're like, that's a number you count, but you can't see out into the thick fog or mist or smoke. And the PC's like, well, I'm going to run back through that field of gases and stuff. Can I make a roll? Remember where I stepped at? You're like, well, you sure can. You already did it. Make a roll, and then navigate their way back, and then have these rando monsters get blasted by flame, or choke on the poison gas, or someone tosses the wizard hiding behind a rock, uses their burning hands to ignite the gases that are there in the region and have it explode. Of course, let them do it. That's what it's there for. All right. Some other mechanical effects as well would be much like the extended list of methods, right? Fire, water, air, earth, salt, ash, steam, ooze, magma, so on and so forth. Would you allow your players, or would you reskin things in your game to be that specified in terms of their elemental nature? So an example would be, could a character acquire, become I don't know, a druid of elemental salt? Yeah, Yeah, Zevron says rolls one. You came from the sky. Yeah, no, but seriously though, dude, like could instead of just being picking like earth, air, fire, water, would you allow someone to diverge off slightly and go like, my ranger doesn't just fight elementals, but he's got the power of like dust and smoke and ash or steam or whatever. Would you allow that, or much like what would be how would you differentiate the difference between scalding steam and fire? Okay, so an example would be, on one hand, you could claim that um, someone who a PC that is resistant to fire would also be resistant to the heat from steam. But does that mean that like steam causes fire damage, but actually doesn't ignite anything on fire as well? Meaning like it doesn't ignite oil, that it's hot, but it doesn't continue the damage on. What other immunity would steam, hot steam? I guess if you don't breathe, but steam is more a physical thing to boil the body. Um, Salt is caustic as well, so salt could have more of an acidic effect to it. Maybe instead of a rust monster, there are like salt monsters or something that exist in this region. You don't even have to have them look like your typical rust monsters, but they could operate the exact same way, right? Anything from like, instead of water elementals, they could be acidic elementals, giving them some kind of ability, changing their damage potential or portions of their damage potential into acid or something of that nature. Yeah, I mean, there's so many things. Severin's like, my answer is no, because I run mostly political and investigation games. If we're near a volcano, things went way wrong somewhere. Um, well, you never know. I mean, you could change things up a little bit. I mean, there the a volcano could be the backdrop to some other things going on, right? So it doesn't have to be Dante's Peak where it's like, oh, volcanoes going off, and we need to run for it, right? It could be there's we brought this up before. It could be a MacGuffin is in and or around a volcano. Someone is kidnapped. Some technological device is hidden and stolen. There's a piece of information. I mean, uh, a bad guy, an enemy that knows they're being hunted down by the PCs, might escape to someplace dangerous, hoping that although it might be dangerous for them to navigate, it might also be a backdrop for the players to navigate in and around, being confounded by the environment because whoever they're chasing is doing a thing. Also, there, what's the show? Um, an idea by a big bad, a classic big baddie idea from, say, James Bond or something like that. There's a device that can control the weather, and if the PCs don't go after the bad guy and disable the device, the world will suffer the effects. And of course, you have the person in the dark suit stroking the white cat, threatening the world, right? You know what I mean? Um, and maybe this device or magic or psychic ability or alien technology or whatever have you, maybe they're able to predict certain things, and they fire the device from the satellite and boom, a volcano erupts somewhere, and then they're like, the next time I'm going to do it in a major city, and the PCs are like, ooh, and of course it has to happen. You gotta have a volcano erupt like in the middle of like Manhattan or something, or like some other major city that is closely associated to where you live, and have it just erupt in the middle of the town with thousands, tens of thousands of people running for their lives, and the PCs having to, drive, run, flip, jump, and survive what's going on. So yeah, I could. I think you could mix the two together. I think you could, as well as the fact that the ramifications of a volcanic eruption happening somewhere else. Like Pelora said the other day, um, people in Greece were affected by volcanic activity in Iceland because it was blowing across. So this could happen many thousands of miles away, but everything from the air being choked out, the sun being blotted out, to people, of course, suffering from choking events, and the refugees happening because they're, wherever they lived, they have to move into a new region, and that could spark tensions, as food and services and healthcare and clean water and crime and things like that start being pushed to their brink as the population starts doubling and tripling, because maybe people had to sail away from these islands, or the mainland area has been destroyed and people have to sail away from the mainland area. I think it would be an awesome idea to have the player characters, literally the game starts with the player characters as the de facto leaders of a group of people that had to leave their home, and they look behind them and they're on sailing ships, and they look back and they just see these, a number of massive volcanoes just spewing lava, tens of kilometers or miles into the upper atmosphere, and they're sailing away on the ships as lava spills into the ocean and steams, and their homes destroyed. And maybe the PCs are the de facto leaders of these communities, and you could reskin player characters like hit points, and this is what I would do. I would reskin their hit points and their hit dice and that kind of thing to represent the lives of the people that they need to protect. So it's not really that the player characters are tougher or whatever, but it is their desire to live long enough and to live another day to protect the people that they are in charge of. Zebra like, my players wouldn't care though. While interesting for me, they focus more on crime solving and talking to NPCs. And of course, hey, listen, we're talking about volcanoes, right? That's a special exploring the outer reaches of civilization is its own thing. Some people are just starting into like a survivalist style game. They're not into like backpacking across unknown regions. They're not into colonizing ancient worlds that have just been discovered or something like that. Maybe some people are just more into the politics and such, which is fine. And you have to read the room, right? So, like Zev, you already know this is what they're into. But like I said, it wouldn't have a direct impact, but you could say, oh, this other part of my world, there's this thing happening, and the players are like, it's no big deal to me. I don't really care. But over time, the resources that they normally count on, maybe those resources start getting pulled from them. The guy they go to when where they need the confidential informant that they go to when they want to find out what's happening on the streets. Maybe they start mentioning about the crime increasing and things like that. And the PCs are like, why won't you give us any information? We come to you all the time. And he's like, dude, I gotta watch out because the guards are cracking down big time, and I really gotta go because crime is rampant and people are starving. I mean, they're fighting each other over foods and services and rations and things, and the players are like, rations? What are you talking about? And then you have to like knock your PCs on the head, like, remember that thing I told you 8 sessions ago? Yeah, it's having an effect now. And they're like, oh, and maybe we should have paid attention to that. But again, having something where, like, I love the idea of, instead of like rewarding your player characters, one of the big rewards, or two biggest rewards in games, are experience points of some sort, however it's measured in your game. And the other thing are like magic items, and and I say that very generally, whether it's like I have a new modification for my cyber gun, or I have a new magic sword or something like that. But what I love is the idea of having something naturalistically given to the player characters, meaning like if they're in a dense jungle, they find a plant that has some curative effect. If they go into the deep ocean, maybe they find something that's been lost there from an ancient ship, or they go into the forest and maybe one of them befriends or finds a small animal that they're able to train that becomes their companion from then on, that kind of thing. And it's the same can go for Volcano, where maybe they're able to retrieve some elements from that have been pushed out of the deep reaches of the earth, and someone is able to forge them a new weapon. And then, of course, you as a game master are like, well, I'm going to reward my player character with like a +2 magic sword. It's just the reasoning behind it is that the player retrieved some ore or stone or something like that that came out of the earth, and this person is going to pound it into this weapon. Or maybe someone that lives in a community that lives at the base of the volcano hands over a ancient weapon from their ancestors or something, and says that you are one of us, you're accepted into our family, and hands them a spear that has some special ability, or grants them some kind of like willpower bonus, or some kind of survival thing. As a slight plug for the cinematic environs, we've written a book called The Blasted Lands. It's basically based in and around the idea of a volcanic region, and the locals are able to cultivate different types of ash. There is like ivory, ebony, and crimson ash that you can cover your body with. And that ash gives you resistances to certain things like acids or heat, or necrotic damage and things like that. So maybe there's something naturalistic that you can give the players as well, mechanically, and especially if they're like one and done kind of things, where maybe you're afraid, like, if I start handing out magic items, they're going to get too powerful. I don't want to deal with it. But if a lot of these things are like one and dones, much like scrolls and potions, you could just very easily reskin these damn things. Like, oh, they gave me a glass arrowhead, and if I take the glass arrowhead and crush it with a rock, it allows me to do this thing one time. Or I've got this powder or this drink or something. If I drink the drink, my skin will turn bright red, and I'm able to walk through lava once. Sure, why not? Zevron says, like Volcano erupts and destroys a trade route, so now they need to negotiate deals with a nearby nation while easing things with past deals. That may work. Yeah, of course. Listen, not just volcanoes, but any weather. Nature itself is a great equalizer when it comes to political dealings. Many a nation has tried to, over the history of warfare, has tried to do these things, and when weather has been involved in it, it has decimated armies. Right now, for some reason, I'm thinking of a war with Russia. 1800s, 1900s or something, and someone wanted to invade Russia, and of course the Russian people were they're like, we live in the wintertime all the time, it's like not a big deal for us. But when an outsider's like, oh, it's no big deal, we're just going to trudge through the desert or trudge through the snow, and come to find out that their own troops are like, hell no, we're not doing that, we're suffering frostbite, and we're starving, and we can't resupply. So weather itself does a thing. Matter of fact, they even showed an example of that in the movie 300, which is one of my favorite movies, where the Spartans from 300 are standing there on the cliffside, and they see the Persian navy getting decimated by a major storm. I'm sure they thanked Neptune for that one, as it capsized a ton of their ships. So yeah, weather and nature has a huge impact on politics, and it could very well a volcano could erupt and destroy a trade route. There could be important dignitaries that went traveled far away, and the volcano's been there forever. Nobody really cares. There's like crops and things are growing around it. All of a sudden, there's an eruption, and those important people can't get back home. And the fact that they can't get back home, maybe there's other people who want to take over their positions. Like, now's my chance to assert power and to get a little bit of a stronger foothold in politics, because these other people are smarter and have more experience dealing with outsiders or whatever. But I'm the person, I'm worm tongue, and I'm going to slip in while the the guard dog's away, the fox will play in the hen house kind of thing. So that's also a possibility as well, and volcanoes are as dangerous and as deadly as they are, and as much damage as they do, just from their ash and from their smoke and from what was mentioned yesterday. There was a home was literally sectioned off by lava as it spilled across roads. As a matter of fact, you can get on YouTube now and see, and basically see a ton of videos where lava just spills across roads, just because that's what because lava, right? And as it slowly creeps along, is as dangerous as it is. And where's my brain going with this? Oh yeah. So as this happens, as the environment changes, so too will the people in and around it. And there are actually lots of resources that come out of volcanoes. Mind you, when it's a little safer to approach, but there's a lot of resources, mineral resources. Imagine some kind of dead nation, and of course it's around a volcano that's been dormant for hundreds of years. It could be into the thousands, and no one's really given two craps about it. All of a sudden, side of the mountain blows off the side, lava spills down, everyone runs for it. Then all of a sudden, they realize that, like, I don't know, gold, platinum, iron, copper, all kinds of mineral resources are there. Oil, who knows? Maybe it's technological. They're able to capture gases that are down there in the deep reaches or whatever. And now all of a sudden, this might be a mecca for mineral rights, and now everyone wants to come scampering in and get their chunk of the pie, and their slice of the pie. And the people there are like, hell no, you didn't give two shits about us before, so get your ass back home. And that could easily be a way for players to either have to go in and negotiate peace, or at least speak on behalf of those from one side, the other side, or both sides. Maybe there are corporate interests that could care less about the politics, but they want to be involved in it and gaining these rights. And at the same time, there are innocent people that have been displaced. And so, yeah, I definitely, I think you can still use these major events as a backdrop. And as a matter of fact, even if we want to leave from the more technological aspects and go into the ancient past, a lot of the things that happened in nature were blamed on the gods' work, the gods' hand, reaching down onto earth and giving us a message as to their joy and or anger at humanity. And floods, storms, hurricanes, tornadoes, and of course volcanic eruptions would count in that. Now, whether you were playing more of a gritty, realized kind of world, like the world of Isklof and Vikings world, where it's very gritty, the people believe in the gods, but really the gods don't exist. Or you can go very arcane, and an exploding volcano might literally be a rupture in time, space, and the planes. So there could be a scrambling by the denizens from the plane of fire and the denizens from the nine hells to make headway into the prime material plane, both of them may be working together or literally, elbowing each other aside because that's where they want to get a foothold or something. That would be pretty interesting as well. Um, so yeah, there could be some other ramifications, and maybe they do make headway into your setting, and now literally there is a hell on earth, and these fiendish creatures are here, and maybe you never wanted tieflings to be in your world, but now they exist. Maybe you never wanted um, elementally spawned sorcerers in your world, but this is the thing that this is the catalyst for some rando pyro pyromatic beings to exist in your world, and you're like, you know what? I'm going to reskin the Chaos Wizard. I'm going to reskin some of those effects to be more closely related to like a volcanic, random list or something. Or I'm going to take, the dragon blooded, and I'm going to reskin it so it fits more into my world. Sure, go ahead, go for it. Maybe some other things start happening in the world, like we mentioned about the idea of a paladin's order in Dungeons and Dragons not necessarily being knights in shining armor. The same could be true for the types of character classes that would exist in your world. The character classes that sail on the open seas and the character classes that exist in a dense jungle might be different than the character classes that exist in and around the peaks of volcanoes and that kind of thing. So, yeah, I mean, maybe instead of, allowing players to pick other kind of weapons or something, like, in my game clerics don't use edged weapons, but I think it makes perfect sense. That's an old school thing, but anyway. But you could say, well, it makes perfect sense for your cleric to have a spear with a obsidian point on it, taken from the volcanic the volcanic gods that your character worships or something, and going for something like that. So yeah, I'm into that. Now we have come to hour mark. Sorry to say, yes. Tomorrow is World Building Wednesday, and on World Building Wednesday, much like we always do, we always mix and blend some of our topics together. But we can start talking about a volcanic world, maybe even. We can go high. Of course, we're going to do this with Future Friday, but we can go very high tech with it, meaning maybe the players are colonists that land on a volcanic style moon or whatever. We can go very ancient with it. George R.R. Martin brought it up in his Game of Thrones series, where Volantis, I believe there were 14 volcanoes. I think there was an actual number. The number 14 was brought up, where volcanoes just went off. We can even go with the refugee idea, where the player characters are now trying to figure out, like, where do they what are they going to do with the refugees of the people that have left a world devastated by volcanic eruption? Do they hold on to their old ways? Do they create new ways and new ways of dealing with how they're going to survive? Maybe they're forced to return to the blasted kingdom from whence they escaped from. That kind of thing, and maybe even a world in which an incursion from another plane of existence is in reality, and has been going on for not just hours, not just weeks, but months, years, dozens of years, where these incursions are coming down from the volcanic mountain, and what do the players do, and how do they relate to such a thing. So anyway, guys, thank you for joining me. Today was Squirrel Appreciation Day, so